definitely had brain fog. I cried a lot. I would cry for no reason at all. I'd be so emotional. When I would feel moments of feeling better for a few hours, I would be angry because I'd be angry that I was going through this and not knowing what it was. And at this point, I already knew not to go to a doctor. I just felt like they weren't really gonna figure out. Not right away, but later on, I got what I guess would be what people call fibromyalgia. That's what I felt. I had a lot of back pain and joint pain,
Mhm.
and I didn't relate it to that until I took your program. I started hiking again, nothing really severe, but just walking in the area that we live in is a bit hilly. So I kayaked a couple of times already this year. I can go to the grocery store, I can go shopping, I can go for hours. Nothing really bothers me at all. I started working out again, like with weights rather than the easy ones at home. So I'm doing that every other day for about
Nice.
25 to 30 minutes. Light weights, but I'm working my way up that way.
How's it going, Thrivers? Miguel here with CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Holly, fellow Canadian from Ontario, and she's here to share some of her story dealing with a lot of these debilitating symptoms for, about 10 years on and off. And she was diagnosed with CFS. At her worst, she was actually bedridden, lots of different symptoms, lots of fatigue, just super drained, the typical CFS stuff. A doctor even said it could take her up to 10 years to recover. But in the last several months, we've proved that wrong with all the progress she's made and everything she's adding into her life. But Holly, you want to quickly introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, I'm Holly Hall, and I've been dealing with CFS and CFS related symptoms pretty severely for about a year. Of course, I'm pretty close to recovery at this point. And my doctor diagnosed me last fall through what's called a Dutch test. Takes a look at your adrenals and cortisol. It did prove that my body was biologically going through extreme stress and low cortisol at, I think it's low at night and high in the morning. So it was the opposite of that. Basically, I wasn't making enough cortisol. My adrenal, he called it adrenal insufficiency. That's what I was,
Yeah,
which
that's what I
is,
got too. They told
yeah,
me I had that. Exactly
yeah,
that. Yeah.
really, yeah, that's what he said. He goes, "I'm just gonna call it that." Now, I am grateful because I did find him. I went to him thinking I had severe thyroid issues, which I've always had most of my life, but he had had CFS, so he diagnosed it right away. I think that's what it is. Did change my thyroid medication, so that was helpful. But the interesting thing was when I started watching your videos because I really didn't wanna settle with a 10-year, diagnosis. It's gonna take you 10 years to get back to normal, and so I'm the research queen, so I started looking up. I found your YouTube videos and started watching them and eventually joined your program, and some of the things that I learned from your program, I started looking back at my last 10 years going, "I've had this a really long time, maybe even longer, maybe 20 years."
Mhm.
And I could see symptoms that I thought were my thyroid, but were most likely a type of CFS. And with the brain fog, mostly the panic attacks, I had a lot of panic attacks. And your program taught me one thing. If I just paid for your program just to learn that one thing, I would have been happy because that completely changed my life. And that made me realize what my panic attacks were, with which was your sympathetic nervous system. And I didn't have them as long because mine would last for hours, sometimes an entire day. And now they won't last that long because I know what it is. And then I know how to work with it. And that was a game changer. Just that alone was a game changer for me.
That's amazing. I'm so glad it resonated with you and helped you have that mind shift. We always say you're just one mind
Exactly.
shift away. For you, it was that one thing that made it click, that made a huge difference in your recovery trajectory.
Yeah.
So, leading up to last year when things got really intense for you and you're bedridden at some points, what was it like leading up to that point? So you had this on and off for about 10 years. You probably had some bouts where you felt pretty normal, then other bouts where you're pretty run down. What did that look like? Was it just like a zigzag up and down or
And big eggs. I was really sick when we came back from Mexico because we're nomads. We were traveling last May of till June of 2023. And then that was it was fairly severe. Could have had COVID. I'm not sure. And then I had a couple of weeks where I felt normal. We went in our trailer, we traveled up in Ontario, up north in Ontario, came back, got sick again. And then that lasted 6 weeks or so. I traveled again for a week, went to Montreal, visited with a friend, came back, got sick when I got back, which now was diagnosed. That's when I probably got the reoccurring EBV, and I just couldn't recover after that. I just couldn't get in my energy back. I was gotta think we're living in a fifth wheel because that's what we do in the summer. Right now, we're building a tiny home, so we have more of a home base, and I'm sleeping on the couch because I need to be sleeping alone, away from my husband because I'm sleeping all day long, waking
Mhm.
up in the middle of the night. It's so sporadic, and I could barely just get up, make something to eat, and go back to bed. If I went to the grocery store, it was a big mistake. Halfway there, I'd be, "What am I doing?" I'd feel like I'm gonna pass out. I feel like I'm going unconscious while I'm there. I feel like I'm walking on sponges. It's hard to explain, but, like, my feet was spongy or noodly, and I was freaking out what was happening to me, and I was thinking it was my thyroid, but it was
Mhm.
very consistent.
Yeah, and what kinda other symptoms were you dealing with? Because some people, they have, like, 30, 40, 50 symptoms. Usually, the main one is fatigue, and some people have
I had
pain, but w
fatigue, I definitely
yeah.
had brain fog, I cried a lot. I would cry for no reason at all, I'd be so emotional. I would get when I would feel moments of feeling better for a few hours, I would be angry because 'cause I'd be angry that I was going through this and not knowing what it was. And at this point, I already knew not to go to a doctor. I just felt like they weren't really gonna figure out. Like, I found another doctor, which was very helpful. I didn't have any problems with eating. I did get not right away, but later on, I got what I guess would be what people call fibromyalgia. That's what I felt. I had a lot of back pain and joint pain,
Mm,
and I didn't relate it to that until I took your program. I thought it was just I'm allergic to dairy, so if I eat dairy, I have those symptoms, so I thought maybe I had some dairy and I didn't know it. But
yeah.
I realized after your program that it is a part of the CFS.
Yeah, yeah, and these symptoms, they can be so confusing sometimes because 'cause they're changing, they're overlapping. It's all just like a big clunky mess of
Mm.
tons and tons of different symptoms, so it's kinda hard to tell sometimes, but yeah, for me, I mean, it was changing all the time. One thing for sure that was always there was the fatigue and a lot of the brain fog too, and the pain towards the later stages of recovery, there was, like, more and more pain. Seems like it was exponential, especially during the
Yeah,
flare-ups.
yeah, when I started managing the fatigue and the panic attacks, and my panic attacks aren't like what people think anxiety and you feel jittery and you feel mine are like doom and gloom, I'm dying. Those are the way they've always been, and no matter how much logic I throw at it, breathing exercises and whatnot, they wouldn't go away. I found that, like, with your programming and the brain training, for some reason, that really helps. I still have them periodically, but at the time, it was at some point and when I felt a lot of brain pressure, when I was so here we go to Florida, and then we end up in Mexico because of traffic and so many problems in Florida. I'm like, "Let's just go to Mexico," because that was part of our plan, "and get out of here." Mexico, here we are, 5 minutes from the beach, and I'm in bed for 2 months that we're there. I can't even get out. I can barely
Mhm.
go up and down the stairs. And at that time, I think it was its worst, and that's when I got this enormous amount of brain pressure. It just felt like somebody had a vice grip on my head all the time. And
Yeah, I can get that.
I was just diagnosed at that time because I did the test in Florida. Then my doctor diagnosed me with the adrenal insufficiency, and yeah, I was frustrated. I was trying different diets and elimination and what's triggering me all the time. It was really upsetting that way.
Mhm, and that's what I was gonna ask you. What are some of the other things that you tried? Because I tried so many different things like medications, supplements, detoxes, IV treatments, like seeing different specialists as well. And at that point, we were just like throwing darts at the board, seeing what
Yeah,
sticks. Most of it made
yeah.
me worse. So, what did you try?
I know people who have thyroid issues too and didn't have some of the problems that I'd had. And I've been hospitalized probably about or went to the hospital about at least 6 or 7 times throughout the last 10 years, having this sort of doom and gloom, panic attack, blood pressure skyrocketed, and I think I'm dying, so I don't know what's wrong, and then they just do every test in the silent, they say, "There's nothing wrong, your blood pressure's too high. We're not gonna let you go until it's down," and then they let me down, put me on blood pressure medication, which I didn't really need. It was just those are the symptoms, and they would just say, "Could be your thyroid, but this is not common." Of course, the medical industry isn't very well versed in thyroid either. There's not a lot of tests done supported for lab tests and that. And so, yeah, I didn't really I remember years ago they tried to put me on antidepressants and those just I'm so sensitive to drugs that those just made me worse instead of better. And so I stopped taking them and they just didn't have an answer. And specifically during COVID, and I think a lot of people had this kind of experience, I just stopped going to the doctors. It's just like, it's not gonna work. It brought me anxiety just going to the doctors, and even if I felt like I had to go to the hospital, I just wouldn't go. They're just
Mhm.
gonna diagnose me with high blood pressure, give me a big scare tactic that I need to straighten that out and go home, and I go home more stressed out than I was when I went there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, my doctor just said, like I said, ten years for him, bed rest. Now he got it in his late 30s. I'm not in my late 30s. I don't want 10 years to go through this. And it did shift the way he works because he is very unusual the way he works as a doctor, which I thank him for diagnosing it because nobody else was gonna do that.
Yeah, and I have a similar experience too. Even now with with doctors or anything health related, it's like I trust myself way more than I trust doctors now, unless I break something or there's something seriously wrong or I get
Right.
into a car crash. Definitely, I'll
Right.
go to the hospital. But
Yeah.
if there's weird stuff I'm feeling or I'm curious about something, I'll like trust my own intuition because I just know my body so well at this point. And most of the time, it the stuff goes away. Now, I think doctors are great. Like they have a great role in society. They're definitely needed. But when it comes to CFS, like or long COVID or fibromyalgia, it's
No.
definitely not the best. At least from what
No.
I've seen and I've heard. They're just not versed in it, like you said.
And
Like,
I'll tell you a crazy story. Just before I got really sick, I'm a very spiritual person and I wanted to upgrade my spirituality, if that makes any sense. I'm very Buddhist as well. So I wanted to have more of, and you always hear of these stories where things happen to people and it changes their lives.
yeah.
So I basically said to my higher self, like, I do want a life changing experience, but don't make it that I have to decide whether I'm going on, cancer meds or I don't want a near death experience. And then this happened. And I will tell you that this is the worst and the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I think you've shared that quite a bit too. In fact, most of your coaches share the same story. If I didn't, I actually enjoyed in a weird way those times where I was bedridden with brain fog because my mind was always going a billion miles a minute. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm always got way too much going on. I'm constantly in front of the computer as an entrepreneur. I work with clients as well. And I was like, wow, it's really nice to just have my brain barely can focus on one thing. It's kind
Yeah.
of a break from my brain, you know?
And it's interesting, right? Because after you come out of this, you start realizing that's the whole purpose of the brain fog. It's to stop your overly analytical brain from thinking. So I think back to those times for myself as well. I'm like, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad. Like I had 8 months of not working basically. Now, on one hand, I could see that as, oh, I'm not productive. I'm dealing with all these symptoms, but when do I ever give that kind of break to myself? So life was going at a very slow pace compared to my life right now. It's just light speed every day. It's pretty chaotic. But during those times when I can't move in bed, you just reach a different level of meditation or a different
Yeah,
level of mindset because you're going deep within. You can't distract yourself with any outer things. You have to dig deep and you learn so much about yourself during those times. So I'm very
absolutely.
grateful for those times too.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that's what was helping me was meditation. Whenever that brain pressure got so bad and there was nothing I could do, I couldn't even get out of bed, I would just sit there and meditate. I would just
Yeah.
meditate And actually, most of the time, I would meditate for a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes and it would go away. And I was like, wow. And here I am, this spiritual person, but I'm not very good at meditating. I might do
Oh,
5
me too. I'm
minutes.
horrible. So bad at meditating.
I do positive affirmations every morning, some Tai
Mhm.
Chi, stuff like that. Us AAA personalities, we got things to do. I don't have time to do this.
Yeah,
So it was really good at bringing me back to being in the moment. And so when I have energy bursts, I don't know if I have more energy than I've ever had, or I'm just appreciating having this clean energy. That's really what it
that's it.
was. Because you got
Clean
to
energy,
think,
so important.
the
Clean.
adr it's not like my adrenals just decided, "I'm not working anymore." Obviously, they've been suffering for a long time, and I wasn't working on clean energy. I was working on my adrenals to
Mhm.
take over, which is not their job. Their job's only there to do it for emergency. So my
Yeah.
body was thinking it was in emergency mode all the time. And honestly, I see it with my clients now too. I work as a life coach, and I can see this even if they don't have CFS. I can go, your parasympathetic nervous system is telling you that you're this angry, that you're this frustrated, that you're this lost, that you feel stuck. I can apply a lot of what I learned from your program to non-CFS people.
Absolutely. Because I think with all of these symptoms, it's not like this, just like you said, didn't just come out of nowhere. There were early signs, sometimes early as 5, 10, 15 years ago. There's certain personality traits that develop this kind of illness, this hypersensitive nervous system, these symptoms. And they're just more exacerbated the more severe your case is. And when you're bedridden, you can't move, yeah, you really see those patterns start to come out because they become more extreme. So, with you, you're in a place where you're stuck, struggling, and you were at your worst point last year, right? That's when you're bedridden sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So last year you're going through that. Then you find CFS recovery, and then you
yeah.
you join the academy. You learn a few new tools and strategies, and one of them really clicks for you, which is understanding that, okay, this is why my panic attacks are happening. This is why my symptoms are flaring up. This is what's going on. What are some other kind of golden nuggets that you took away from this stuff in the last few months?
From your program?
Or yeah, just in general, as you're moving up in terms of capacity and getting your life back, what are the biggest kind of mind shifts that you've had? Could be from the program or outside.
Yeah. So definitely the acknowledgement of my parasympathetic nervous system. Am I saying that right? That acknowledgement of that. I've always been a body, mind, soul, understand my body. I have
Been
to
pretty
treat
tuned in.
well or it's not going to treat me well. But I didn't quite understand. I never had to really research that myself. I was more around nutrition and routine and whatnot, mindset. And the idea that you said is just a mind shift away is exactly that. Because as soon as you understand what it is, like really integrate it. At first, you just understand it because, oh, you're teaching me something. They must be right because they got a program. But the one day that you're just integrated, which I'm a pretty quick learn and I normally heal very quickly. So this is another setback. Like, why is it taking me so long to
Mhm.
bounce out of this? As soon as I integrated that, it just calmed my entire body immediately every time I would have this. Also, this is a in the closet kind of dis-ease. I don't even like to call it disease, but of dis-ease. And nobody gets it. I am embarrassed to say that there was a time that if somebody told me, "Oh yeah, I got chronic fatigue," I'd be like, "Yeah," or fibromyalgia, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's all in your head." In a way, it is. In a way, it is all in your head, but not. It is a very physical
Yeah.
body is having physical symptoms,
Yeah. It's in your
and
brain, your physical brain.
it just made me realize how much our brain has control if we don't understand what we're allowing it to control because it's taking control for good reason. Like you said, I had brain fog because my brain needed to stop working. But my reaction to that was to freak out. I'm
Mhm.
dying. I'm having a panic attack. How long is this going to last? This is horrible. And that reaction is what really made me sick rather
Yeah.
than me going, oh, my brain needs a break. So your system helping me understand that, and you got a lot of diagram, video, I'm a science kind of factual person. So that was very helpful for me to see the facts and the science to back it up. And if I honestly, If anybody ever feels that they're burning out, because I know you guys don't like to call it crash or burnout, they should just take a program like this. They don't even have to be diagnosed with CFS because it's just gonna change the way that you deal with your own brain. So the fact that you're in the closet, it's very helpful to have people to talk to that relate because you do think you're crazy.
Oh, yeah.
People are gonna think I'm crazy. I can't tell anybody this. I was somebody who wouldn't have believed me.
Me
So
too.
why
Exactly.
wanna tell anybody, and I'm embarrassed and on a multitude of levels. Now I talk about it quite openly, but I still know that nobody has any clue what I'm talking about as well. And I so related to you because my normal job is very much like yours, where people say, "What do you do for your living?" I'm kinda like, "It's hard to explain." I have a job that's very hard to explain, that people just don't get it, and except my clients, and they do, and the same with you. So, I found it comforting to be a part of your community where I could talk to people about it. It is lonelier now that I'm better. I'm getting a live say 80 to 90% better. It's still it's lonely now because you can't my husband is very supportive. He gets it. He understands to a degree what's happening, but it's not like I can go to my daughter or my friend or my neighbor and go, "Oh, I'm having a bad day because of DFS." It just
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
part's hard to do, but it also taught me maybe some things aren't it taught me to be much more okay with who I am, with not needing validation from other people, not needing support from other people. I know that sounds odd because everybody's always looking for support, but it taught me like I don't need to have that. I can do this on my own. I'm strong enough on my own. And I also don't need to remind my brain by telling my story over and over again to people that don't understand it. It's okay to be alone with it.
Yeah. And for me too, when I was really starting to get my life back, I was almost in this no man's land where I'm not quite fully sick with CFS, but I'm
Yeah.
also I'm not fully normal. I haven't fully reintegrated back into the world yet. So I'm like in between. Like the
Yeah.
people who have CFS still and they're bedridden and struggling, like I'm further away from them than I was before, at least when I was getting better. But I'm not quite reintegrated back into the world. So you're in this in between area trying to figure out, okay,
Yeah.
what's the next move? What do I want to do with my life? And do I want to go back to doing what I was doing before? But I think you learn the principles of what got you to this level in the first place and what got you all of this momentum. And if you surround yourself and stick to those principles, it just keeps the ball rolling. Obviously, not being extreme in your behaviors, learning to take your foot off the gas pedal, things like that, doing things that make you truly happy, things that you want to do, not that you feel like you should be doing to achieve some kind of accolade or something like that. I was very big on accolades before and very competitive, but I had to
Yeah.
put that on the back burner, when I was working my way back into life. But it was a wild journey, but lots of fun.
I know that you're like, there's parts of your old life you didn't really wanna go back to, and there's
Oh,
certain
yeah.
people that you don't so it does get a little bit lonelier after because it's I don't wanna go to that party and drink and fake that I'm happy because and have another drink because I'm not having a good time without that drink because I can hardly tolerate alcohol anymore, and, there's the odd time I can, but most of the time, I can't. I am on vacation for 4 I got a bottle of wine. I've had 1 glass out of it in the last 4 days. Like, I can't even I couldn't even manage it, so I'm like, "Okay, I'm not having that." And now I don't wanna go to those concerts and where everybody else is drinking and everybody else is yeah, I just it's just something it's lonely in a way because it's like, "Okay, now what do I do?" Because I don't wanna hang out with these people
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah, and there's a big reframe because up until I got sick, even to the point where I was completely bedridden in the hospital, up until that point, my whole life, my perspective was, I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to work really hard. I have to go work out. I have to get it done. It's this have to. So it almost felt like I wasn't even in the driver's seat anymore. I'm just along for the ride. And this ego, this mindset, this extreme type A personality and perfectionist was like, you have to do it like XYZ. Whereas now and after I recovered, it's I get to do this stuff. I want to do this stuff. Knowing that if I think one of the reasons I got sick in the first place was I didn't want to fail at anything I did. I wanted to be successful at whatever I touched. So I'd push myself to my absolute limits. But now it's like, okay, well, I would like to do this. I would like to host a virtual event. For example, earlier today we hosted a virtual event. I had like 400 people register.
Oh,
And if 100 people show up, fine. If 200 people show up, fine. If 50 people show up, fine. It's like I get to do these things, and everything now in my life is just like icing on the cake, because there was a time when all I wanted to do was just walk outside and stand upright and not have any symptoms. And I told myself, I remember so many times telling myself, if I just got that, that's like winning the lottery. That's like a miracle. So I'd be happy with that. So if ever now I'm getting stressed out or overwhelmed, I think back to those times and be like, Miguel, you could just chill out on a couch and just live a simple life. You don't have to do any of the stuff you're doing, but you're
right.
doing it because you want to. And there's a deeper purpose. It's
That's
bigger than, yeah, it's the big ripple effect, seeing the ripple effect I can have. So it's more like externally focused in terms of
right.
what can I give versus
Mhm.
what can I get with all these accolades and things like that. So
I love that, and I'm being reminded of I can't believe I forgot this. It's the adjustment period concept.
yeah.
That is I literally even use that with my clients. There's another word, period, and I sometimes call it too. As soon as I understood that when I'm having a bad day, like I haven't had a bad day in I can't even remember, maybe 6 weeks, and I had one yesterday. And it might have been our trip up here and dealing with the trip up here and whatnot. And knowing that it's not a setback, it's actually like you said, you go to the gym, you work out your muscles hurt the next day. You're not like, "Oh, I'm never going to the gym again. My muscles hurt." You're gonna be
Yeah.
like, "Okay, that's normal. I gotta take a break on working out those muscles." And so just the concept of the adjustment period is a leveling up, but you need to rest while that's happening, while you're strengthening that was a huge game changer for me. Like, literally, if you did a program on that, you could help the world. Forget
Mhm.
about that's because that's a huge breakthrough.
Oh, yeah. That was one of the main concepts that helped me get through all this, because, like, everything we teach you guys inside the programs and on the YouTube channel, that's 90% more, like, almost 10 times more than what I knew when I was recovering. My doctor just drew a bunch of diagrams on the paper over, like, a couple of weeks. I think it was less than 10 diagrams, but we drew it over and over again. But one of the main concepts was the adjustment period. We didn't even call it that at the time. He just said, yeah, when you have symptoms, that's your body just getting used to the stimulus. So it's not a bad thing that you're flaring up. You're actually supposed to flare up. It's going to happen. It's
Mhm,
inevitable. So once I
mm,
realized, okay, so it's not a bad thing, it just reframed it from something very negative and going backwards, and as a sign of almost like going in the wrong direction, to like, no, this is your opportunity. Like, now is a time to get to the next level. It doesn't mean push through, but your mind is being tested. Your brain is being tested to see if it can handle this small amount of stimulus, because
yeah,
there's no way you can do more stimulus and get to the next level without being able to handle this level first. So it just
mhm.
changed everything for me. And then I ended up calling it the adjustment period, because it's a period of adjusting to the new
Absolutely.
stimulus.
It's a perfect we call it APs in
Yeah,
your
APs.
programs. "I'm having an AP. This is my AP." Yeah, it's very interesting. I'd say I was in the middle of the road because I know I found people on your program that have a lot more severe symptoms than I've ever experienced, and some that have better, like, about the same or better symptoms, but they're just so consistent, they can't get past that sort of plateau. You can plateau, and then you feel like you're stuck there for a
Mm,
while, and, yeah, it's been very, very helpful and slowing my life down too, because we've been nomads for 3 years and it was just like go, 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 unexpected. Nomad sounds like this wonderful life to experience, and it is because we get to see the world, but it doesn't come without its hiccups and its
yeah, of
challenges, and
course.
things get canceled and delayed and constantly changing your living arrangement to adjust. There's
Yep.
adjustment periods and all of that too. So it came with its challenges as well, and that was a big part of it, and that's why we're building our tiny home now because we just want a home base that is comfortable while we're traveling, that makes it easier on
Mhm.
us.
Yeah.
Like a
And I
yeah.
remember when I was sick, like really sick, I thought, what would my dream life be? Because I had so much we have so much time to think, right? You can't do stuff physically when you're stuck in bed.
Yeah.
So you have to create this kind of fantasy world in your mind and spend your days in there, right? Especially when you can't move in bed. So I kind of built up this world in my mind, and it was like, okay, what's the dream life? I want to travel. I want to go everywhere, just be able to work from anywhere I want. And then you see things as all sunshine and rainbows. When I got better, and this like about 3 months ago, I tried out the nomad lifestyle, being on
Mhm.
the go, fulfilling the fantasy that I had when I was sick. And yeah, it definitely does not come with its rainy days for sure. Like it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and
It
everything's perfect.
absolutely we
Yeah.
spent about the first part of our nomad, we spent 5 months in, on Vancouver Island and on
Ooh,
Pender Island and in Tofino. We had all kinds of hiccups during that traveling, but it's my favorite. That's where your area, your stomping grounds are. It's my
mhm.
favorite part of Canada, and then we went there a year later. We spent a few months there again, hoping I'm gonna go in the fall, spend a couple of months there. But, yeah, it can take a lot out of you, and I think a lot of people did that during COVID. They just started traveling, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and
which is
I
super
think there's
interesting.
a lot more CFS issues since the onset of COVID. It really shook a lot of people up and changed their lives, some people's lives drastically. The one thing I would advise though, I mean, it depending on your severity of it, and it's not any kind of medical advice at all, but my doctor basically told me to stop my life. Don't work anymore. Don't work with your clients. Don't look at a computer. Don't even exercise. And then he gave me the fear of atrophy, where your muscles are, like, not
Deconditioning, they start
working anymore because 'cause
melting.
you're not anything. I'm
Yeah.
going, "Okay, you're telling me not to go to the gym, not to work out." I used to be a hiker. I used to be, like, a really severe hiker and kayaking, and so you don't want me to do that, but you're telling me my legs are gonna lose its muscle mass, and I was like, "No, I have." Working with my clients was the highlight of my life. I wasn't gonna stop doing that, and my brain was still my higher self was still able to function. That's the one thing I found amazing is that even though my body was and I had this brain fog, I was still able my intuition was still strong, if not stronger, and all of my abilities were strong, if not stronger. So that didn't there's like to me, it's like if you're an artist and you love to paint and your doctor says, "Oh, you got CFS, you can't paint anymore." Why would you stop doing that? That's brings you joy and it calms your brain and it puts you in the right side of your brain, which is a good place to be when your brain's overworking, worrying about all your symptoms. I don't like the idea that if doctors just tell you to stop everything in your life and just rest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and, it's one thing if they say, "Alright, you need to stop everything you're doing temporarily, but in the
Mhm.
meantime, here's a plan to kinda rebuild your life," but they don't do that, they just say, "Well, just keep resting, and you should get better," but resting is not gonna get someone out of this, you know? In fact, you'll just in that case, yeah, you will decondition, so there needs to be a plan in place, but something else you said I wanna touch on that's so important as you're going through this journey, it's like you never lose touch with who you are at the deepest level. No matter how bad the
Mhm.
brain fog or how bad the symptoms, it's like I never lost touch with like the inner Miguel. Actually, deeper than that, because even the name Miguel, that's just like a label on the
Right.
identity we have. But like you get to dig really deep and find out who you really are, what inspires you. It's crazy because you start to think about things you would never ever think about, at least not at this level. When you're feeling like you lost your life and it's the final chapter and like you're never going to get out of this, you start asking yourself, well, what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? If I did get my life back, what do I want to do? What's really going to make me happy? If I were to, I would think this, I would be like, especially those times that I got rushed to the emergency room, I thought that was it. I actually reflected on my life on the way there because I'm like, okay, if I'm going to go like in the next hour. But what has my life been like? What am I proud of? What do I really remember? What really stands out? If I look at this timeline of life, what pops out of that timeline? What really mattered? And it's like, well, the people mattered, not really any accolades or accomplishments. It's the people. The time I went
Mhm.
camping with my dad and we were watching the stars when I was like 7 years old, or that time on a band trip when I was 16 years old and we were all just having the time of our lives. It's all about people. So it makes you think and reflect on what's really important. But it's interesting because no matter how bad the mood swings were or how delirious I was from getting no sleep for multiple days, there was still that inner me at the deepest level that I got to meet and get in touch with.
Right?
You
Yeah,
get to
at
meet.
the time, that's probably your only best friend at the
Yeah,
time
yeah,
is me, myself, and I, and let's reinduce because that's what we do, we run around in life distracting ourselves from
yeah.
dealing with who we are and our
Mhm.
insecurities and whatnot, and I also find myself much more compassionate about silly things, like, the other day, there was a girl and somebody cut her off while she was driving, and she rolls down the window and she called this person every freaking name in the book, and I d wasn't like a near accident or anything, I'm not quite sure what happened, but it made me go down this rabbit hole of thinking, like, all those times that somebody cuts you off or they're weaving around on the road or they're getting angry at the in the lineup or they're taking their time, they're having a hard time, "Why didn't you have your change ready when you got there?" And I think, "You don't know what they're suffering from. That do they have CFS? Did they just find out they have a chronic illness? Did they just find out their husband came home and said, 'I'm having an affair, I want a divorce?'" Like, are they dealing with, like, severe physical pain right now? You have no idea what they're going through, and that's what it made me think now. I just have this don't even wanna use the word forgiveness, but this pardon for anyone that is maybe ticking me off at the moment because 'cause they're not fast enough at the cashier, and I giggle at myself and going, "That was you, Holly. You were the one taking your time because you couldn't
Yeah.
think about what change to give them because your brain wasn't working, and you were just so glad to be able to go to the grocery store and get what you want." And, yeah, it just really makes you take a look at the little small stuff doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely feel more in touch, like, with just humans or just anything overall because you get more in touch with yourself, and you can empathize a lot with what other people are potentially going through, especially when you've been deep in the trenches. You can relate to people's hardships and because 'cause you've been through it, right? There were days when, you're probably lost in a grocery store just dealing with symptoms, you weren't, functioning 100%. So, you
Oh,
never
yeah,
know when
I'm sure I
someone's.
ticked off quite a few people in the grocery store many times just wandering around like, "What did I come here for?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what can you do now that you couldn't do a year and a half ago when you were at your worst? Like, what kind of activities are you adding into your life now?
Like, here we are at the cottage here, so I'm able to do that to get out of the house. I started hiking again, nothing really severe, but just walking in the area that we live in is a bit hilly, so I kayaked a couple of times already this year. I can go to the grocery store, I can go shopping, I can go for hours. Nothing really bothers me at all. I started working out again, like with weights rather than the easy ones at home. So I'm doing that every other day for about
Nice.
25 to 30 minutes. Light weights, but I'm working my way up that way. And I yeah, I'd say that's about it. I'm gonna get back in once our tiny home is done. I got my office slash studio, which I haven't had a separate room for all of that in the last 3 years. So I'm excited to get back into that and start. We'll see next year how the traveling goes. I'll be a bit nervous. Like, how am I going to do once we're looking at going to Europe for 4 months.
Ooh, 4 months. Wow.
Yeah. Normally,
Traveling to
we go
different
from
places?
November to May, so this is we're gonna cut it down to 4 months,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and but I'll work it so that I can come back. We won't pre-book too much so that if I'm not able to manage it, I'll come back, but I think I'm gonna be fine. I can a couple of besides yesterday sort of having a little bit of a setback, and today I'm fine. I'm taking it easy today because of yesterday just to have that adjustment period to get back, which is what I learned from your program. Don't just, adjust slowly back again. I feel better. There are some days where I feel better than normal. And I
There
think
we
it's
go.
because it adjusted a lot of my bad habits. I had some bad
Totally,
habits too.
totally. And
So I'm a better person because of that. So I feel like pretty normal actually most of the time.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and the goal is to make you feel kinda better and live a more sustainable lifestyle than before, because that's the ultimate goal of everybody. Because if we go back to the same Holly as before, we're gonna fall into the same patterns and habits. we had to rebuild a 2.0 version of yourself. And I
Yes.
think when
Yeah.
I think about recovery, people say, well, how do you know you're recovered? How do you know you're fully 100% recovered? It's really hard to tell in terms of percentages. And I think that what we're doing is we're just constantly optimizing our health and our nervous system. Like today, I'm not going to put a cap on how healthy I could get. I'll just keep optimizing. So I feel like we're all just moving along the scale of like how optimized your health is. When you have CFS, obviously you're lower on that scale. Things are not optimized, but you get better and better and better and better. And even me, I feel like there's so much more room for growth, um, versus, calling it a done deal, finish line, recovered. But the goal is to have a much better quality of life overall than you have had previously.
I
It's
think
not
it's to be able to read your body better as
100%.
well, because I look at it's how I explain it with my clients, and I learned this through what I've been going through, is if you just think of energy, like just energy that goes into your house or your heartbeat, which is energy, it goes like this is how energy works
Yeah,
if you were to see it.
absolutely.
And so our body goes like this too, but we're kind of living in a world where we think we're just supposed to be doing this, and we're not. And your body gives you signals to kind of dip down, such as headaches or stomach aches or migraines or just low energy or brain fog. And we don't listen to it. We just keep
Mhm.
on pushing through until one day it just goes clunk.
Yeah.
I'm doing this. So I just learned to honor those days like yesterday where it's just, no, my body wants to slow down, take a break, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with me. It's not a bad day. It's just is what it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, you're just conditioning the nervous system, and the way I see it too, I have this analogy, it's like a rubber band. This rubber
Mm,
band analogy. Like, if you were to stretch a rubber band and make it more conditioned and durable, like, you don't just keep stretching it slowly and, like, keep going. You stretch it, then you pull it back, stretch it, pull it back. So you're, like, stretching it and adding in that stress on it, but then relieving that stress. The next time you
yeah.
stretch it a bit further, then come back, and then further and come back. You don't just go straight, keep stretching it, or else it
No.
will
I mean, that's
snap.
what a rubber band is made for. It's made to adjust
Yeah,
itself
it's like
to whatever you're using it for.
yeah, it's flexible, it's elastic. So,
Yeah.
with adding on capacity and just, optimizing your health, it's kinda like that elastic effect. You push yourself a little bit, then dial it back, and push it, dial it back, but it's all about that kinda balance, that yin and yang. It oscillates the energy up and down.
And you have to know, like, to give you just a scenario last week, I had planned this is our anniversary weekend for my husband and I had planned last weekend to go up north, visit a friend who actually is from Vancouver. She's a musician, and a whole bunch of old friends were going to be there, and they're going to drink and they're going to party and they're going to be yelling and screaming. And I started getting anxiety about it, and I wasn't recognizing my symptoms right away. I'm like, why don't I want to go? And finally, I went, no, my intuition is telling me I won't be able to manage that. And I don't want to party and I don't want to drink. And I love my friend and I'll see her another time, but that my old me would have went, oh, you're the party girl. You got to have your friends. Who are you just sitting at home alone? And everybody, you get that, what do they call it? FOMO, fear of
Yeah.
missing out. So I would just go with this fear of missing out. But no, this time I heard myself and I said, I'm going to cancel it. We're right on the lake. I'm looking at the lake right now. We got our boat and we're just relaxing. I completely changed our plans because I listened to my body.
Mhm.
I'll
Yeah.
never know what would have happened if I went. Maybe I would have come home feeling bad, or it actually rained all last weekend. So we wouldn't have been able to do half the things I wanted to do. So that was a plus that we changed our plans. But yeah, you
Mhm.
just start to listen to your body, and as soon as I changed my mindset that we're not going, I'm canceling it, we're gonna come up here, I was fine.
Mhm.
I was so
Yeah.
happy to say relieved. I didn't even realize I was stressing out over it. So you
Yeah.
start to really listen to your body a lot more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, for people watching this right now, and maybe they're people who are bedridden right now or couch bound, and they're listening to this and they're in a tough place. You've been there, I've been there. When you start feeling like, man, am I ever going to get better? Is this thing ever going to go away? Is this the rest of my life? What are some words of encouragement you have for them listening to this? who might need some moral support, having been somebody who's gone through this, what would you tell
Well,
them?
I would say I started to feel like hope and that I could see a momentum that I was getting better like a few months ago. So I really didn't have it severely, maybe for a year. Like that's a big difference from 10 months. And it wasn't just like, oh, a year later I woke up, I felt better. I gradually got better. So I would remind people, and I did this when I was really sick with my thyroid a couple of decades ago, is get some kind of journal. You guys do it with the video idea on your program, but just journal it so you can go back, even if it's just a smiley face, sad face, check off boxes, whatever, just to tell you. And it's not to monitor like I'm getting better, I'm getting worse, but just to, because you shouldn't do that, but just to remind yourself that because there are days when you have bad days, you think, oh, this is the worst ever. I'm never going to get better. You forget that you were better. You forgot that you were on a momentum. And
Mhm.
you wanna remind yourself that you are, because you will, 100%. There has never been a time where the lie I was telling myself when I was at my worst day came true. It never came true. I did get better. I did feel better. I did feel healthier. My brain fog did disappear. So it will absolutely happen. If you can find any kind of group or program or one friend that has gone through, like we all have Instagram and Facebook. I can guarantee you, if I put on my Facebook, I have CFS. Anybody else have it? Probably 20 people would come out of the woodworks. I didn't even know had it. And they would help support me because they have a voice now. So they're going to want that opportunity. But also know your threshold. I also found that I did join a few private groups and I did that with my thyroid as well. And I found that people really dumping every day, like the severity of it, made me feel worse.
Yeah.
And so you have to know what your own personal threshold is, but it's curable. Don't let any
Mhm.
doctor tell you anything at all, anything different. And it isn't because doctors are, if you really understand how much money and finances and approvals it takes to study any medical issue, like thyroid, for instance. It's just the money just isn't being put out there. And there are people out there that really want to help, but their program gets pulled or their funding gets pulled or the grant gets pulled and they can't put the work out there and it doesn't make a lot of money because so just don't give up. Don't give up ever because there
Mhm.
is a light at the end of every single tunnel. There is. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so true what you said. There's so many people who recover. It's absolutely possible, even with diagnosed cases, even like you had tests done that proved that you had these things, right? Undeniable proof, but you're also getting your life back. So, you know, a lot of times when people are searching online, there can be a lot of negativity around the topic of CFS and long COVID and 5% recovery rate, this and that. But I mean, most of the time you hear from people who are still stuck in this. The people who recover for the longest time before we had stuff like YouTube or social media, these people just moved on with their lives. They weren't really sharing their story, which is
Yeah.
why we love doing videos like this, having people like you on to share the possibilities and just what can happen when you stay on track, you don't give up, and then you finally find a solution that works, that you can get your life back, right? And there's so many recovery stories out there. I'm guessing like probably 99% of people just moved on with their life and never really looked back. But people like myself, like you, people who come back to the community and try to go back to the same trenches they were in and try to pull people out of it, like that's really what we're trying to do. So, for you guys listening to this right now, it is absolutely possible to get your life back, despite what you might have read, despite what a doctor might have told you. Like they told Holly, it could take 1 year or 10 years. That's what they said. And here you are getting your life back. So, it is
And thank
absolutely
you,
possible.
Miguel, for putting the program together that you've done because you're even there's so much on your YouTube channel alone that you're giving out for free, and it can be really helpful. That alone is a wonderful community just to because people make comments in there. You can read the comments. I watched your YouTube channel for about 3 or 4 months before I joined the program, and because the things were working, and I felt it was relatable. Everybody was relating, and I could relate to everything that people were saying in the comments. So just don't. let anybody tell you that you can't get better because they're not telling you
Absolutely.
the truth. They don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's been super inspiring having you on, Holly. I feel like we've had a great conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours
I
just
know.
the way the conversation is going. But is there anything else you want to share with people watching this? You shared tons of golden nuggets. Um,
I know.
Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think if you can find that little piece of you that needs adjustment and you honor that change that it's creating, whatever illness or whatever downtime that you're having, really that's golden. That's golden. I wouldn't change the last year for anything. I'm glad I went through what I went through, and I'm glad that I'm better and I'm a different person. And it takes a long time. Even now, I'm like you said, I'm kind of in that in between no man's land right now. Like, now what? You're a different person. What are you going to do? I'm going to go out and help more people. That's what I'm going to do. And yours might be different. Yours might be I'm going to spend more time with my children. I'm going to quit my job for a while. I'm not going to worry about, I'm going to downsize and not worry about money. It might be something. I'm going to, stop eating sugar all the time. I don't know. It might be something, but whatever that is, use that as that's your reason. That's your why.
Yeah.
That's
That's your
it.
purpose. That's your
Yeah.
deeper purpose. And going through this, just like your experience and my experience, and everybody who's come out of this on the other side, it was the worst thing that ever happened to us, but also the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like that theory, the Phoenix theory. Um, I don't know if you people watching this might have heard of it before or not, but it's essentially like in order to transform yourself into your higher version of yourself, the old part of you has to, I don't want to say die in a way, but
It's
it
got
has
to
to
go to
crumble.
ashes.
Crumble to the ashes,
Yes.
basically. But it's the rebirth of the phoenix. It's like you go through the trials and tribulations, you go through some of the hardest things you go through, not just physically, but mentally. But that allows you to start fresh, start from a blank slate, and decide, okay, what do we keep? What do we discard from our old life? And what do we want to add on so we can evolve into this better version of ourselves? And if you do the work, if you, it's not easy work. It's a lot of hard work, but the actual recovery system, it's quite simple. It just takes some effort
Consistency.
and consistency and belief in yourself. Ultimately, that's the ultimate thing that's required. But once you
It's
transform
the
yourself.
hero's journey. Look it up. Look up the
Mm,
hero's journey. There's a book on it.
yep,
You're going through a hero's journey and you're the hero of you're your own warrior. You're your own hero. You're the one that's going to save yourself.
exactly. Hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. I dive
Yes.
deep into that. I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, we are all superheroes of our own story, and every superhero story has that moment in the story where they're at rock bottom, backs against
Kryptonite.
the wall. Yeah, the odds of success is like 1%. Like, they should not win this battle, but that's what makes the story more epic, and that's what develops that superhero, because without
Yeah.
that, they're just a regular person, right? So, think of your guys' story in your life right now as you are the superhero of your own story, or you're the superhero in the making, right? What would future you thank yourself for, and how would they want you to think and act, and what would they want you to do right now? Because that person exists in the future, and that is you. You're just not there yet. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Thank
amazing concept to
you.
think
Yeah.
about. Yeah, yeah. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We went really deep on this. This one flew by quick, right?
Yeah.
This was an hour. I feel like we
Thank
could
you
talk
for
for
having
hours.
me on and I could share this story.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for coming on here and sharing your story and being a beacon of hope. And for you guys watching this right now, Holly was in a lot of your guys' shoes not too long ago. Like, she was bedridden at many times, even just last year. She dealt with all of these symptoms on and off for about a decade, right? So if she can go through all of that and she can be at a point where she's bedridden and just really in a tough spot, and then really rebuild her life again, diagnose case of CFS, diagnose multiple other things. If she can make it out of this, then you guys absolutely can too. So hope you got some value out of this. Comment down, your biggest golden nugget takeaway below. There were so many in this one. This was great. And always remember that you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. So we'll see you guys in the next video. Holly, thank you so much. And we'll
Thank
see you at the
you.
top.